So yes, a very, very warm welcome to all of you on this evening, on a Sunday evening. And I know you could have all been somewhere else, but you're all here, and that speaks volumes of how important this is for you. So thank you so much for joining in, and really nice to have you here at Moolah for Women. And thank you so much, Devika. Devika Doshi is here. She's our guest speaker. For every woman thinks that it's important, and it absolutely is one of the most important topics for everyone who is married, and even if they're not married and they want to get married somewhere in the future. So yes, absolutely. And that's why Devika, there's been so much of so many people who asked me for this webinar, and they're all looking forward to joining in. And it's not just the women, but also some men. So that's really heartening too. So yes.
Absolutely. Very excited to start our session very soon.
So a very, very warm welcome to all of you, and lovely to have you on a Sunday evening. We have our guest speaker here, Devika Doshi, who is, really excited to have her here, and really looking forward, Devika, to listen to what you have to say for all our married women and the women who would probably want to get married somewhere in. And of course, also for the men who are here. So yes, a very, very warm welcome to you too. The way we'll go on for today's session is I'll give a brief introduction about Moolah for 5 minutes, and then I'll introduce Devika to all of you, and then hand over the stage to Devika. So if that sounds good, let's begin. A little bit about Moolah. Moolah is a financial literacy platform specifically designed with a special focus on women. And it's a unique approach to make finance simple, fun, jargon-free, so that the audience, whoever it is, can get gently introduced to the world of finance and start taking charge of their finances from a position of knowledge. At Moolah, we have programs for kids, for young adults, for working professionals, homemakers, young women, retired women, and women entrepreneurs. So there is something for every one of the audience who is interested in financial literacy and wants to grow and learn about finance in the most simple and fun way. The Moolah tribe is a big tribe of over 4,000 plus women we've impacted across the globe, and heartening to see some of you here today with us, and of course, as we grow more and more. The Moolah impact, we've impacted about 4,000 women from across the world, shifting their mindsets to make them feel in charge, worthy, and deserving, empowering them to be equal stakeholders in financial decision-making, supporting them by making them part of a community of like-minded women, and transforming them to become smarter, more confident, liberated, and happier, hopefully. And I hope that these are things which we have been able to do. Moolah also has conducted several workshops for kids and young adults from 8 years to 25 years, trying to increase their understanding about money, starting them early so that they can begin well, providing them with an environment so that they can ask questions, and empowering them to be confident in managing their money as they become adults. And what do we offer at Moolah for Women? We offer courses, 2 courses. One is the Finance Essentials course and a Finance Advanced course. These are courses specifically designed for women. They're both 3-month courses delivered over WhatsApp. And they're just a 2 to 5 minute read every day. So you don't have to disturb your daily routines. You don't have to, so a lot of women say that, oh, it's something which we don't have time. We're doing multitasking, we're working and all those things. So Moolah doesn't take any of your time while you're sipping your cup of tea or just going to bed. Just read that 2 to 5 minutes of read every day. And we have live interactions every week with me, where we discuss various things, and that's a 1-hour interaction every week. And as a part of the 3-month courses, we have 3 master classes and also some monthly quizzes. So by the end of the course, women really shed away their fears and feel confident to manage their money. We offer one-on-one coaching, where we accelerate your journey. If you want to deep dive into a particular topic, or you want to get clarity about your personal finances or understand your portfolio better, then you can come for a one-on-one coaching with me. We also do workshops for target groups, where, like we've done it for kids, we do it for organizations and communities, where we tailor make the content and depending on what your audience really wants. Yes, that's a little bit about me. I'm Meeta Gupta. I've done my MBA in finance and have over 30 years of experience in banks and corporates. I'm passionate about financially empowering women. My partner, a co-founder, is Ritu Prasad. She's a dear friend. She is also has done her MBA and has 30 years of experience. She's currently also an organic farmer and an angel investor and is passionate about financially empowering women across the globe. Some of the guest speakers that we've invited in the past are so many of them, and we continue to do that on various topics, including finance, mindset building, business and entrepreneurship, book reviews and economic awareness, and women empowerment. So those are some of the experts. And of course, as Devika talks today, she also becomes one of these team members who we will be putting here on our list. And we also conduct a lot of corporate events. We've conducted webinars and workshops for corporates and women-centric forums. So these are some of the customized workshops we've done for various organizations, including Suba, IL&T, NRB, Bajaj Auto, IDFC, and many more. We collaborate with various industry partners to help you convert your knowledge into action. So once you've got the basics of finance and you've started understanding how the world of finance operates, you will want to take action. And that's where we, collaborate with various partners so that you are able to start acting upon your finances. So like we have partners for investing, for insurances, for legal issues and wills, for tax planning, financial planning. And we also hope to get Devika on board for some of these sessions, if we can collaborate with her in the future to be able to partner with us for, any kind of issues related to women's rights and every such thing. These are some of the things which our tribe members have talked about, that Moolah has made them feel more confident. They've started taking charge of their finances, and they've equipped with the, various kind of knowledge about finance and various other things. And yes, so if you want to join Moolah, this is my email, moolah.fl@gmail.com. And that's my WhatsApp number. It's +971 544 33785. So you can reach out to us for any of these things, booking a one-on-one coaching or joining the Moolah courses or booking a workshop for your audience or collaborating with Moolah. And yes, we have a registered office in Gurugram, Haryana, and you can also reach out to us on social media. We also have a podcast now called Moolah Talks, and do reach out to us. Reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or check out our podcasts as Moolah Talks. That's it from me. I'm going to very quickly stop sharing the screen. So yes, Devika, a very quick introduction about you. Just one second. So Ms Devika Doshi is an alumnus of the Government Law College and of London School of Economics and Political Science. She's practicing as a counsel in the Bombay High Court and also the Family Court at Bandra. Her areas of expertise include all aspects of family law, such as divorce, custody, alimony, cross-border disputes, as also matters pertaining to surrogacy and adoption. She was also a guest lecturer at the Government Law College, teaching the law relating to women and children. So a very, very warm welcome to you, Devika, and I hand over the stage to you. Do you want me to tell what are the topics that you're going to be covering today, or how do you want to go about it? So
no, that's okay. I'll just quickly run through it.
Perfect.
Great. So thank you very much, Meeta. Thank you, Ritu, and a very warm welcome to the Moolah tribe. As Meeta rightly said, thank you for dedicating the next 45 minutes or so to me doling out some information which hopefully would be helpful and would empower you with some knowledge. And that's definitely the aim that I hope to do over the next 40-45 minutes. And I would like for this to be a bit more interactive. So I would appreciate it maybe once I'm done with just running through the basic concepts, we could open the floor, for the tribe to ask any questions that they may have. So we can go on. Before I get into this topic, which seems a bit too heavy for a Sunday evening, honestly, for me too, I've come across this one little snippet where there's a husband and wife, and they're driving in their luxury sports car down the Big Sur in California. And the husband looks over at the wife and he says, darling, 25 years ago, we had a cheap car, we had a cheap apartment, we slept on a cheap sofa cum bed, and I had a rickety old black and white TV. And today I have a massive mansion, we have multiple sports cars, we have a luxurious bed and a flat screen TV. But at that time, I had a 25-year-old hot blonde as a wife, and today I'm married to a 50-year-old. I've done my part of the marriage. I think you've not lived up to your end of the bargain. The wife looks at him. She smirks and says, you can certainly go ahead and get your 25-year-old hot blonde, but do remember, you'll go back to your cheap car, your cheap apartment, your cheap television, and your cheap sofa cum bed. So that can actually be, as they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So that can definitely be something that this topic could go in that direction. Not always, of course, the law in our country, which may not seem to most people, is very fair and reasonable, and there are, many systems in place. But definitely, I thought best to start on a lighter vein. Now, to just get right into it, I understand that bad marriages, difficult marriages can definitely be emotionally draining. And when there are kids involved, it's a lot more difficult. But what we have to be mindful of is not only the emotional stress, but also the financial implications of these marriages. I mean, many a times I have women who come to me, and I say women, not the men, because they are more aware of the finances. I have highly educated women who come to me as clients. And when I ask them basic questions about their own net worth or their husband's net worth, they are completely clueless, completely blank, and they have no idea. And these women have been married, I tell you, for a good 10, 12 years. So it's not a very recent marriage where I understand you're still trying to get to know your partner. So of course, Moolah steps in and, helps you in terms of understanding the financial aspects of it, but I'd get into the legal side of it. Now, as we all know, marriages in India are governed by their personal laws. So the Hindus would be governed by the Hindu Marriage Act. The Parsis have the Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act. There is a special act for the Christians, and for the Muslims have their personal laws and codified laws. And there's a civil law known as the Special Marriage Act. So what happens is that once we are registered under the relevant statute, then automatically the rights, obligations, and the laws flow from these statutes. And that's when the question of alimony and maintenance comes in. Now, sometimes these terms are used a bit interchangeably, which is not necessarily how it's supposed to be. Now, there is always in a marriage, in the dynamics of a marriage, there's always a more financially vulnerable spouse, and there is a spouse who is earning a lot more and is supporting the family and is more well off. Now, alimony is the gross sum or lump sum or the financial support that you seek from your spouse at the end, once the divorce decree or any final decree is passed by a court, at the end of it, which usually is a lump sum amount or at times can be a monthly amount. And then there is interim maintenance. When there is a matrimonial dispute, either the husband or the wife will file certain proceedings in court. These proceedings could be anything, not necessarily divorce. It could be for judicial separation. It could be for restitution of conjugal rights. Now, as we all know, the law and the courts will take its own time because of the due process of law and the procedures that have to be followed. Now, if these proceedings in a court of law are going to go on for 3-4 years, you would obviously need some sort of financial support and sustenance to help you to tide over these next few years. So it is at this time when a spouse can ask for interim maintenance, which is the necessary expenses that a spouse would need in order not only to fund the litigation, but also to support herself in case she is unable to support herself because she may not have sufficient income, or she may not be working, or she may have children to look after and some such. Now, interestingly, in the Hindu law and the Parsi law is gender neutral. So in these laws, it's not just the wife, but even the husband can claim interim maintenance during the court proceedings, during the pendency of the proceedings, or alimony at the final stage when the divorce decree is passed. Of course, this husband will also go through the same standards in order to achieve as to realize as to whether he would be entitled to the alimony or maintenance or not, which factors I will get into in just a little bit. Now, once we've understood the difference between alimony and maintenance, alimony being the lump sum given at the end once the decree has been passed or even post the decree, and interim maintenance being the monthly sum that is given during the pendency of the proceedings, we have to understand who can seek this, who is entitled to it. Of course, as we all know, definitely the wife is under various statutes. And as I've just told you, of course, the husband is also entitled to it only in the cases of a Parsi marriage or a Hindu marriage. Now, in all of these cases, what is also important is that the Special Marriage Act, as I said, would govern people who do not want to be governed by their personal laws and decide to have a civil marriage. The Hindu Marriage Act, whilst the wife can file a substantive proceeding for divorce or judicial separation or restitution of conjugal rights, as I said, in that substantive petition, she can also make an application seeking interim maintenance till such time the proceedings are decided, and also for a lump sum permanent alimony once the proceedings are decided.
So
Now,
I have a question here, Devika, if I can just intervene here.
Yes, please.
So just to clarify, so you can choose whether you want to go under the Hindu Marriage Act or the Special Marriage Act. So if you want to, okay.
Absolutely.
So, the choice.
So if there are two Hindus,
yeah,
they have the option of registering their marriage under the Hindu Marriage Act, which means that all the rights, obligations flow from that act. Or you may decide, I don't want to have these religious processes. I don't want to do the Sat Feras and all of that. And I want to be married under the civil law. So at that time, you can choose to register your marriage under the Special Marriage Act by following the procedure as per the act.
And that's done at that time. That's done at the
time of your marriage. And I'm very glad that you brought this up, because most people come to a lawyer only when there is some dispute. And there are many a times in my limited years of experience where I have seen people who have gotten their marriages registered under the wrong law because they have not been advised. Of course, you don't go to a lawyer at that point of time. The agents don't know any better. And then when they come and say that we want a divorce, you realize that it's not so simple, because your marriage in itself is not recognized in the eyes of law. For example, a Hindu and a Christian cannot have their marriage registered under the Hindu Marriage Act. And then they come to me after 3-4 years and then they say, we'd like to file a mutual consent divorce petition or whatever. There is some dispute. You realize that this marriage is not recognized in the eyes of law because you've not registered it under the right statute, or you have not applied the right act. So I'm very glad you brought this up, because it is from that very stage that you have to be well informed as to what you choose to do.
So this is a very interesting thing, because and obviously we'll all like to know a little bit more about this, maybe later or at this time, whenever it works for you. But one of the thoughts is that typically when Indians get married, they're getting married by there's like a ceremony which is happening. Some of us get ourselves registered, some of us don't get ourselves registered. I remember when I got myself registered, I don't even know what I got myself registered under. So I have no clue. So, even now I have no clue whether I've got myself registered under the Special Marriage Act or under the Hindu Marriage Act. And these things are something which we are totally oblivious about. And some of us haven't even got ourselves registered.
Correct.
Right. So for the longest time, we've just had a ceremony and we were like recognized as husband and wife as per a ceremony. And maybe those kind of things also we'd love to know more about. How does that work?
Absolutely. So that is also something very important that one needs to know. And I think one realizes and one gets to that point only when there is a dispute and you go to a lawyer and then the lawyer tells you that, this is not valid. So I'm as I said, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is something that one should be very, very off when we go ahead. So that, as I was saying, under the Hindu, we were talking about the Hindus. The Hindu wife can make an application, as I said, a substantive proceeding for divorce or judicial separation, as the case may be. And she can also make an application for interim maintenance to be supported till such time the proceedings are heard, and finally after the decree is passed. But she also has the right, so that is one statute. she also has the right to go under another statute, which is called the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act. Now, under this act, which is open only to a Hindu wife, not to a husband. The husband can go under Hindu Marriage Act, but only a Hindu wife who is living separately from a husband and without forfeiting her right to maintenance. And if she can prove that she has been neglected or abandoned, or her husband has treated her with cruelty, or he's converted his religion, and there are many such grounds which I won't get into right now, she can seek support, financial support, even under this statute. Other than that, since we're just talking about a Hindu wife, and I want to stretch this argument a little bit longer, there is also a summary proceeding under the Code of Criminal Procedure, where a wife can once again ask for maintenance from the husband. So one would think that this is very unfair, that a wife can get money under the Hindu Marriage Act, she can get money under the provision of the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, she can go under the Code of Criminal Procedure, and of course we have the Domestic Violence Act also, where she can get some monetary support. So how is this fair to a husband? And it is fair to ask that question because the court, and by virtue of a very recent Supreme Court judgment, is also cognizant of the fact that, number one, you need to disclose the support or the financial support that you're getting from each of these proceedings. And then the total amount that you're getting is usually adjusted or set off. So it is not an unnecessary burden on the husband. One has to understand that the objective of alimony and maintenance is not to punish. It's not to make the husband a pauper and bring him to the streets, as my opening joke may have said so. It's more so because it is a social justice cause to support a wife, to support a spouse who has all along been dependent upon this husband, whose duty and obligation it is to support her at the same standard of living that she has been accustomed to during such time that she was married. And of course, not to sort of get him to beg, borrow, steal in having to pay her this financial support. So that is as far as the Hindu law is concerned. Now, interestingly, and I know today's topic of discussion, we're sort of focusing more on just the husband and wife dynamics. But because I touched upon the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, it's not just the wife, but a widowed daughter-in-law can seek financial support from her father-in-law if she can show that she doesn't have enough property, or her husband has not left enough property for her, or if the children, if she has children, don't have sufficient to support her. In fact, parents are also required by law to support their legitimate or illegitimate minor children, their unmarried daughter, or their aged or infirm parents. In fact, we have another separate statute that has come out because, unfortunately, a lot of the senior citizens and parents have been just, shoved on the side, and the children don't support them. So there's a Maintenance and Welfare of Senior Citizens Act, where there are lots of laws which are coming into place to support the weaker sections or the people who do not have a voice in order to be able to be supported by their children. Furthermore, as I said, the Code of Criminal Procedure, I just gave you the example of a Hindu wife. But this law also talks about an adult child who may have physical or mental disabilities, who cannot support himself or herself. They can also approach a court and request for some sort of maintenance from their parents, or, because they are unable to support themselves. So there are various laws in place, various systems in place in which you can file these proceedings. Of course, the hearing takes some time, but there are summary proceedings and there are proceedings which are usually filed in a more, substantive proceeding, as I may say. Now that we've gone over the different personal laws and who is entitled to this maintenance and under which law and how do they go ahead and file these proceedings, one has to understand that it is not so simple that tomorrow I just go to a court of law and say that my monthly expenses are about 6-8 lakhs a month, so my husband should be asked to pay me this money. and just for the asking, the court will grant such an order. No. What is important, and now by virtue of the Supreme Court judgment, is that both parties are required to make a full disclosure on affidavit in terms of their assets, their income, which includes their income tax statements, which includes their bank account statements, which includes any investments that they may have made, basically their net worth, their liabilities, their educational background, their employment details, then also in terms of the number of children that they have. So what are the liabilities in terms of having to support those children? So all of this information is required to be put by both on these affidavits. And why this is so important is because all along there was just guesswork that this is probably my husband's income. As I said, the wives who've come to me, they have no idea even the name of the company that the husband works in. And we have to literally start doing a Google search and figure out this information, for the purposes of gathering his net worth and understanding what the situation is. So this brings about not entirely, but to a certain percentage, some sort of clarity in terms of the financial status of both the parties. Now, it's not, again, there is no mathematical formula. There is no way in which I can say that if you give me these affidavits of a husband and wife, I will be able to look at it and tell you, oh, the court is going to grant this amount. Not at all, because this is something that is very subjective. It depends on the facts and circumstances of the case. And other than these very financial aspects that you're putting on record, there are a number of other factors that play. Number one, the duration of marriage. Now, if you have been married for, let's say, 6 months to 1 year, and you come to court and you say, I want an alimony of X crores and I want this house and that house, and you're relatively young, there is a possibility you will get remarried, and you have not invested that much time in the marriage in order to make these claims and demands. I'm not saying you will not get it, but it's not necessarily that you may get these sort of demands that you're making. So the duration of marriage becomes very important. If you're married for 10, 12, 15, 25 years, you have invested that much time in that marriage. You have invested time, money, effort, raised children, as the case may be. Your lifestyle may have been an upgrade to it. So the duration of marriage is very important. The age of the parties is something that the court looks into. And then I come to lifestyle. And again, lifestyle is a very loose and fluid term, if you may say, lifestyle or standard of living. Because what happens is, if you're a government employee or if you're a salaried employee, it's very clear in terms of your statements, how much you're earning before tax, after tax, what's deducted, all of that. So it's pretty black and white. But what happens in business families, and I have seen that many a times, that suddenly the spouse, the husband, becomes an employee who's earning a meager 20, 30,000, but yet is flying first class to, wherever, all over the world, having Maldives vacations and, putting up photos on Instagram and Facebook about all of this that he's having. And the husband and wife have had such a flamboyant lifestyle. And then suddenly when it comes time to doling out money or to having to pay some alimony, then suddenly the spouse becomes a pauper and is really living hand to mouth. Also, there's a lot of fudging of documents. There's a lot of transferring assets in the name of the parents, brother, whatever the case may be, and trying to bring down your net worth as much as possible to show that you may not be able to pay as much. Now, clearly, the court sees through all of this. The court knows as to what are these tricks that are being played by both husband and wife. I don't want to demonize anybody at this point of time, but the court is very much cognizant of the fact that these are the things that usually do happen, and which is why the court looks into everything from the transactions that may have taken place. Has this happened during the time when there was a dispute, when all these transfers have happened? So that's also another very important thing that the court looks into. One needs to also look at the reasonable needs and wants. Because as I said, this is a social justice legislation. The initial intention is, not to make the wife a destitute or anything. Clearly now this objective is being stretched to really far off lengths. But the point of this is that you need to also show to the court that these are my expenses and these are the reasonable needs that I have. And my income, if I have any, is not sufficient to support this, is not sufficient to support my children, which is why I have come to court requesting for these reliefs. And it is only then that the court will actually take cognizance of this and look into it. Now, it's very interesting to note is that a lot of highly educated, qualified women decide not to work and decide to quit their jobs, just before filing proceedings at times, to say that, I don't have a job, I don't have sufficient income, and I need to be supported. Now, the court has also come down heavily upon such educated, working, highly qualified women who choose not to work, who choose not to be financially independent and to take steps in order to support themselves. So in many cases, there have been times where, maintenance has been denied to them, or a very nominal amount of maintenance would be given to alimony, or maintenance would be given to them to allow them to, kickstart their journey. Because obviously sometimes, I'm sorry, sometimes when we do stop working and we do take a bit of a break, it takes time to get back into the groove of things. So that's also very important to realize that an educated woman who has had experience, work experience, cannot decide to sit at home and say that I need to be supported by my husband. Now, another thing that always a query that I get when the clients come to me is that my father has this bungalow and he has this car and he has this business. Will that be considered? No. The net worth of the parents is not relevant for the purposes of deciding the question of alimony. It is only the husband and his net worth and the wife, her net worth, and all the things that I had earlier mentioned that need to be looked into to decide as to what the quantum of this maintenance would be. So that is another thing that one should know is not relevant in terms of your parents' assets. Now, there are certain grounds where the court will also hold that you cannot seek maintenance. Now, suppose if a wife is married to a husband who later on has a very serious illness and therefore is not able to work and therefore is at home and is not able to maintain herself, and then she decides to leave the house and seek maintenance. In such cases also the court has said that no, it is your duty to stick together in sickness and in health, is the vows, sometimes that are made. And on these grounds, you cannot seek some sort of maintenance from the husband. Now, the other factors that are also important, because at the end of the day, if you're going to end a marriage, there are a lot of other things that you need to consider. If you have children, then their education. Education is becoming extremely expensive. So now the alimony also sometimes, if there is no separate child support, does cover these educational expenses or the marriage expenses, which also we, Indians like to have their big fat weddings. So it also covers all of these aspects. And one thing needs to be understood is just like custody, alimony is also something that can be changed, varied, or modified if there has been a change in circumstances. So after a divorce decree has been passed, for instance, and if a certain amount has been given, and there has been a complete change in the financial situation of the spouse who has to dole out the alimony, and if that can be proved, then the court may also look into changing or verifying that order of that has been passed by it. Now, whilst this may be so, we have to, and because as I said, Moolah is helping your tribe as much as you can, there are certain conversations which need to be had not only once you're married, but before you even decide to get married. Because sometimes what happens in the Indian culture, just like how many people are not comfortable discussing a prenuptial agreement at this stage when you're trying to get into a relationship. Of course, if you're dating, maybe you can have these conversations, and prenuptial agreements per se may not be recognized in the eyes of law. But I think it's very important from the very beginning to have these important conversations in terms of the finances, so that there is complete clarity going into the relationship as to how your responsibilities, financial responsibilities, are going to be divided. Now, there can be premarital counseling for that matter. Moolah can definitely help couples come on board and help them understand that these are the sort of expenses that are probably going to come your way, and this is how you should consider dividing your responsibilities. Now, it doesn't mean that just because you've not had these conversations before you got married, now it's too late. Not at all. I think every woman and every man should be extremely aware of their complete financial situation, their own and their spouses. Do not reach a stage where you don't know what your husband does for a living. You don't know which company he works for or is the founder of, or you don't know that he has a property in Lonavala and a property in Delhi and things like that. Be aware of your own finances, be aware of your spouse's finances, be aware of his investments, be aware of the insurance policies, mediclaims, everything that's taken out. And the other concept that I truly believe is important is mine, yours, and ours. I do not want to propagate intermingling of accounts and intermingling of businesses and things like that. Because at the end of the day, you may love this spouse to death, but things can always change. You should not look at these aspects with rose-tinted glasses. It's important to be a bit more practical and pragmatic as this is concerned. Maybe you can have a joint account for the combined expenses, household expenses. But it is very important that a woman especially has her own independent savings account. She has her own independent financial independence and is working and is able to support herself, because tomorrow, God forbid, there should not be a situation where, she has to knock on the doors of the court because she's living hand to mouth. Excuse me. So, excuse me. So it is very important to track this information, to track your savings and your spendings, to have the conversations about what are the accounts you have, what are your passwords, what's your PPF situation, what's your investment insurance situation, all of that. Now, so we've spoken about pre-marriage. We've spoken right now, whilst things one hopes are good in the marriage. And then there is a point of time when you are contemplating initiating some legal action because things are not working out in the marriage. So at this point of time, and I am saying this with a discretion or a warning, that do these steps only once you've consulted a lawyer, because sometimes doing what I'm about to say may make matters worse. But in these situations when things are already a little heated and difficult, maybe change your nominee details, immediately make a will, because if something happens to you, you don't want your spouse to get any of it because you're a warring. So at least in any event, it is very important for everybody to make a will. And I think Aditi had a talk a couple of weeks ago about that, which I'm sure has really was very helpful for the tribe. So it's very important that you make a will so that your intentions are very clear at this point of time. If there are any joint accounts and you want to prevent the spouse from removing all of the money, take necessary steps in that regard. If there are any EMIs that you want to foreclose, if there are any credit cards you want to block, those sort of things those steps need to be taken, but of course only after legal guidance. because some of those things can backfire, and it all completely depends on the facts and circumstances of each case. So these are some of the steps, but I just want to say that, unfortunately, most of the times as a matrimonial lawyer, you see that the majority of the reasons as to why people are willing to litigate in court and are willing to go to any lengths is for children or for money. And things do get extremely ugly and extremely heated. And of course, with children, you can't say anything because you will fight for your life to meet your child. You will fight for your life to have some sort of say in your child's upbringing. But as far as the alimony aspect is concerned, don't let it go to the extent of greed. Don't defeat the very objective as to why this legislation was made. Even when you approach a court of law, when we know we have so much backlog and we know we have so many sometimes frivolous cases that are filed, be a little bit more mindful and a bit more responsible when you're going to a court, because unfortunately, it is also the lawyer's role to play a counselor or make you understand as to what is realistic and what is not. So that is as far as that is concerned. And I think one needs to be really empowered, as I said, and I keep repeating that, to have all your finances and financial information in place so that you are better equipped to know what you are capable of doing and what you are capable of surviving. So that's my very brief talk on alimony and the various aspects surrounding it. And I'm happy to answer a few questions if they are not too case specific, because that obviously depends on the facts and circumstances of each case. So, and if there are any questions at all, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to help out in that regard.
Thank you, Devika. Thank you for that enlightening talk. I think it's much needed for people to start thinking not only women, but whoever is going through a tough time to, before they kind of jump into divorces or thinking of a divorce, start getting a little bit more aware of what the situation is around your house, start taking care of your finances better so that you are ready when you actually take that jump, or when the axe falls, you are in a better shape as compared to, being totally clueless and being left high and dry. So in fact, when we had at Moolah, we actually did a podcast on divorces. And this is one thing which I mentioned at that time, saying that, it's like saying that it's for women, all through their lives when they're kids, it's like, oh, they're going to get married to a Prince Charming, and and then divorce happens. It's like such a probably the biggest irony of a woman's life, right? Where she's like thinking of getting married to the best guy and everything, and then suddenly the axe falls. So yes, let's not make it such a rosy picture. Things are much more, I think a little more difficult in reality. And let's face it, that everything doesn't go the hunky-dory way. So I think what you've done today is really brought it into light that, very important to talk finances pre-marriage, through marriage, at every time, and not leave that it's like something, and easier said than done. I think you'll realize.
Right. And very interestingly, whilst we are talking about marriage, a lot of the youth now may not necessarily want to get married, and they prefer living in together. And it's interesting to note that even a live-in relationship, of course, if it's in the nature of the marriage, where you can show that, there are domestic responsibilities that are shared. We've lived for a number of years. It's not a one-night stand or live together for a couple of weeks. Even in these sort of relationships, the lady has a right in terms of a right of residence, in terms of getting some sort of financial support. So the laws are very much there in place to protect those who need it. The only parting note is don't abuse or misuse the laws. That's the only.
And because of that, the people who genuinely need it sometimes, don't get it.
Absolutely.
So would leave this, it open to the audience. If you have any questions, I have a few here, which I am going to ask you, Devika. And meanwhile, if anybody has a question, yes, I know, Shobha, you've raised your hand. I will just get back to you on that. There is a question from Manisha, which she says is maintenance given in case of mutual separation?
Yeah. So what happens is that in a mutual consent divorce, both parties, the husband and wife, get together and they get to decide what their terms of separation would be. In that sense, they would decide if there are children, the custody would be with so-and-so. If there are visitation or access rights, this would be the thing. And similarly, in terms of alimony, it is a mutual decision that has to be taken by both of them in order to arrive at whether the husband is going to pay the wife or whether the wife is going to pay, or both are saying that we are self-sufficient, we are working, we're earning, we're independent, and we're not seeking any sort of support from each other. So the mutual separation, it's all what you negotiate. There's no right, there's no wrong.
So, okay, thank you. And the other question from Manisha is Hindu Marriage Act and Special Marriage Act. Under which act is it better to register a marriage to ensure future security of women?
So in terms of, there's no right or wrong in how you register it. Under the Hindu Marriage Act, as I said, it is a gender neutral law. So in case things don't work out in the marriage, and if there is a mutual separation, then it doesn't matter because you all will decide your terms of separation. But if it is not a mutual separation, then in that situation, it is the husband who can also claim from the wife, and the wife can also claim from the husband. So in that sense, if you're the wife, you would rather file under the Special Marriage Act, where only the wife can claim from the husband and not the other way around. So that is something that one needs to look into. So it's not really relevant in that sense to decide your future course of action as to whether I should register it under this act or not. But it is important to register it under the right act. As I said, a Hindu and a Christian cannot register under the Hindu Marriage Act because the marriage itself is void in the eyes of law. So in that sense, it's more important where you register it. But at the end of the day, even in terms of alimony, as I said, it's not so straightforward. You still have to place all the evidence on record. You still have to be able to make out a case as to why you require this sort of financial assistance.
So what you're trying to say, Devika, that if there is an intercaste marriage, then in that case, you have to register yourself, or you get registered yourself under the Special Marriage Act only, right? So okay, so either whether the husband is from a different religion, it's not the husband's religion which presides or nothing like that. It's always if there are two separate. Okay,
it is the law under which you are registered.
So the law, that's what I'm saying. The law is if there are two separate people from different culture or different religions, then they will get registered under Special Marriage Act only.
Yes. So now it's important to understand that under the concept of Hindus, Jains and Sikhs are also considered to be Hindus.
Yes.
So if a Jain were to marry a Sikh, they would still be registered under the Hindu Marriage Act. But yes, definitely, if a Hindu is marrying a Muslim, then you could either convert to Islam or be subjected to those laws, or you could have a civil marriage under the Special Marriage Act.
So the next question is palimony. Is palimony applicable in India? What's that, Archie? I haven't heard that word, but yes, I'm sure Devika would have. What's palimony?
It's usually a sort of compensation that is paid by one member of an unmarried couple to the other, in separation as such. And as I said, like in India, the Code of Criminal Procedure, where there is a concept of where you can seek this sort of support. As I said, also in cases of, where in live-in relationships, where you are having a relationship which is a long-lasting relationship, which is in the nature of akin to a marriage, in the nature of a marriage, and you also have certain rights and responsibilities where you can seek some sort of support. And at that time, also, you can file proceedings under the Domestic Violence Act and get the necessary reliefs and the support.
Thank you. Yes, Shobha, you can please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, hi, Devika. Actually, I just wanted to know, I'm married, my marriage is registered, but it is registered under what act? How will I know?
You have the marriage certificate. Once you look at the marriage certificate, you will be able to understand. There will be a section given. If there are 3 witnesses, it's usually the Special Marriage Act. So if you just share it with any lawyer or any, not necessarily a matrimonial lawyer, they will be able to guide you and tell you as to what law your marriage is registered under.
Okay, and after, like, if if like after 15 years of marriage, if a husband is asking for a divorce, whereas the wife is not asking for a divorce, and the husband is not ready to file a divorce, that what happens in those cases?
So in that case, now it completely depends. Number one, if the wife is not at all agreeable to the divorce, then you stay as is, but you try to see that you're being supported in some way financially in case you are dependent upon your husband for that case. And if they continue to stay in the same house and everything is continuing as is, the wife need not do anything. It is for the husband to take whatever steps he has to take in order to file proceedings in court. Or if the wife is agreeable to separate, but she wants a fair compensation, a fair alimony in order to continue with her life, if there are children involved, to move on, then it's best to negotiate those terms, probably go to a marriage counselor, probably go to a lawyer, and try to figure out the best way to part ways. But if the wife is not agreeable for a divorce, she cannot be forced to go ahead with the divorce. And if she is not agreeable to the divorce, then as I said, it's for the husband to go to court to prove his case, the grounds on which he's seeking the divorce, and ultimately for the court to decide whether divorce is granted or not.
One last question. Is the, like the person, if it says, like, I'm not in love with you anymore, can this be a valid reason for getting a divorce?
No, that is not a ground for divorce. So unfortunately, in India, incompatibility or irreconcilable differences as such are not recognized as a ground for divorce. In order to file a contested divorce, and when there's a mutual divorce, you can always say there are temperamental differences, and you don't need to get into the reasons as to why you're going in for a mutual divorce. But in terms of if you're going to file a contested divorce, then it has to be under one of the grounds for divorce, which would be cruelty, adultery, desertion, abandonment for 2 years plus, changing your religion, all of those things which are the grounds under whichever law you are subjected to. That case has to be made out in a court of law in order to show or prove that you are entitled to a decree of divorce. But just simply saying that I'm no longer in love with you is not something that's going to fly in a court of law. To put it very bluntly. You're welcome.
Yes, Manisha, you can unmute yourself, please.
So I earlier asked a question about mutual separation. So what I meant is that what if the couple are just mutually agreeing to be physically apart, staying in different houses, but they are not going in for divorce?
They are not going in for divorce because they
are not interested in making it, a legally divorce or something like that.
Absolutely. In that case, absolutely. Yes.
Can you ask for maintenance?
Yes, absolutely. You can ask for maintenance. You are living separately without forfeiting your right of maintenance for whatever reason. And it is your husband's duty, if you can prove that you do not have sufficient income and, all those factors that we discussed, you can definitely seek maintenance from your spouse without having to file for divorce. It is not necessary to file for a decree of divorce. You can be separated and ask for maintenance.
And if the husband refuses, do we have to take the legal recourse? Do we have to file for that?
Absolutely. That's the only way in which you can go ahead. Of course, the best way is to try and talk it out and explain that these are the monies that I would require. But of course, if he's not willing, you have no other option but to go to a court and get the necessary orders.
Okay, so we file for maintenance, not for divorce. Divorce is not. Just file for maintenance.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Yeah, none. Okay, superb. So we have an audience who's probably happy with what Devika has said. And of course, we will look forward to having Devika in our panel so that if anybody has questions later, they can obviously reach out to her. So thank you so much. Can we have a picture? If all of you can probably come on the screen and get your cameras on for 2 minutes, I'd love to have a picture with all of you. How do we prove adultery? Okay, so there is a question which somebody is asking, whereas while we take a picture, if you can also answer that, Devika, how can you
Absolutely.
prove adultery?
So all of these factors such as adultery, cruelty are very difficult to prove in a court of law, because just like how cruelty is something that happens between the four walls of your room or your home, where your husband or your wife, as the case may be, is treating you in a certain manner which makes it impossible for you to live with them. Similarly, adultery actually means the physical sexual relation that your spouse has with somebody outside of the marriage. Now, that physical act is not something that you can ever prove. You can't actually always get proof of the coitus, so to speak. But then you have to go on the basis of circumstantial evidence. If there are WhatsApp messages or SMSs, which are not in the form of an emotional affair, which says, oh, I love you, and you make my heart happy, but which may more point towards the physical relations that they share, or last night was so fun, and something like that. Or if there are ways in which you can show that there have been hotel bookings or flights taken together or photos in compromising positions, or some things which would point towards the fact that this relationship is on a more physical level, then that's how you prove adultery. But it is more from the circumstantial aspect than from actually having to prove that they are having sexual relations with one another.
Yep. Not an easy.
Can I add something?
Absolutely. Yes, Kajal. Feel free to.
I want to, there you said you can file a divorce for cruelty or adultery. But if the husband and wife are not getting along with each other, there is no cruelty. So on what basis do you file a divorce? You just don't get along.
But the husband is agreeable, or he's not agreeable for a divorce?
Yeah, he is. Suppose we mutually are not getting along and you want to get separated and divorced.
Then you agree for a mutual consent divorce. You say that we're not compatible, we're not getting along. Best to go ahead and file a mutual consent divorce, and let's work out our terms of separation so that those can be crystallized and they form a part of your mutual consent divorce petition. Ultimately, these terms of separation get the stamp and seal of approval of the court. So it becomes like an order of the court. So you have something to stand by.
And the wife can demand alimony, right? In such a case, if he's not working.
Yeah, absolutely. You can demand, but if it's a mutual separation, then it's something subject to what he's willing to give, and if you're willing to take that. And if you're still, if the negotiations or if the talks are not going the way which you're comfortable with, then unfortunately you have to go to court and file necessary proceedings as advised.
But the chances of you getting, alimony, a better case of alimony would be if there is no mutual consent, if it's like a one direction thing. Is that so? Or it doesn't matter. None of those things.
Not at all. It's not like that. Basically, in a mutual, as I said, in a mutual separation, it's something that you need to negotiate and work at a figure. Many a times what happens is that this figure is something that is not agreeable to a wife. And no matter whatever she tries to convince the husband, he is not willing to go above that. Then in that case, she has to go to a court and make the necessary case. And at times, unfortunately, make a more detailed case on the grounds of cruelty or whatever the case may be for divorce, and also for this interim maintenance and final alimony. So there's no right or wrong answer. What happens, what I usually tell my clients is that depending on how reasonable and fair the spouse is being, this is the best that you're going to get right now. Buy peace, close the chapter. Why do you want to spend 3, 4, 5 years fighting for something which a third party judge will decide whether it is fair or not fair? Because as I said, I can never tell that this is the amount a court is going to give you. It's not a mathematical formula. So sometimes one has to just let go. In negotiations, we try to push the husband in that case to up his figure and the wife to sort of come down with the demands and try to reach a middle ground. But one must know that divorce is not fair at all, whether it's contested or mutual. So one just has to buy the peace and move on in life.
Right. That's a very, very important thing that you said, because from what my experience has been from the various people I talk to, I've always, and of course, I only listen to one side of the story. So I won't say that I don't know the other side of the story, definitely. But from what I understand, it's always very unfair on the wife. I mean, in a lot of cases that least that I've seen, that it's never been, the kid will be with the wife, everything, the responsibility of the wives don't go, the men kind of move on. But for a woman, it becomes far, far more difficult to sustain herself and her kids and everything after a divorce. Anything that you would like to say on that, Devika? What is your experience been?
Especially when the woman is not working.
Working.
That's why it is very important to, secure your finances, ensure that there is some sort of, suppose if you're getting some money from your husband on a monthly basis, create some sort of record that every month I'm getting 2 lakhs for my expenditure. He's putting that money in my account. I'm spending this on my child, this on this thing. So there is a record, there is a history of events where your husband has been consistently giving you 2 lakhs. And then when you go to a court of law and you say that I need these 2 lakhs, plus with an escalation taking into consideration inflation, etc., the court realizes that this is something that the husband was paying you, and this is something that you genuinely need for your benefit. And as I said, whatever monies that you get, try having your own savings account, your own account where you have something to fall back on. You're not completely dependent on every penny that is given to you. And, you also try to build, even if you're a homemaker, try to build your account to a certain extent so you have some fallback options. Try to get some assets brought in your name when things are in a good place in your marriage, because sometimes, many a times, a husband will pay the consideration amount and the asset will be in the wife's name. In law, even though she may not have paid a penny, it's still her asset. So at least in that sense, if you sort of kept a cushion or an emergency fund for yourself, at least till such time you tied the litigation, you have something to hold you back.
Yeah, because, a lot of women, even if, I've seen it, even I did that. And a lot of women do that, even if you're really educated, you're working, at some point when your kids are alone, they're like, you just had a kid or 1 kid or 2 kids and you don't have a support system, you land up, taking suboptimal jobs, or you land up leaving your job. And then it's not so easy to get back into a job market, right? So all these things are reality. It's like, it's a fact that you kind of get so left behind in the race. Right. And then 10 years later, there is your husband says, okay, we're not compatible, or let's, separate it. And it's not easy for the wife at that time to even, find a job or get the kind of value she really deserves. So, in reality, these things are far more something which is like, bothers a woman far more as compared to probably a man.
True, absolutely.
Is there something that like you said, that yes, try and create a cushion, try and create some kind of, investment avenues? One more question, in fact, I have on that. Somebody had said it, one of the lawyers earlier who would be called on Moolah had said that the woman is not entitled to her house, to a house, if she hasn't paid for it, right? So is there something like, how much have you paid for how much have you contributed to a house that matters, that whether you will be entitled to a house that you were living in for a very long time, which is in the name of your husband, or for whatever reason, maybe in the common name. I don't know if I've kind of asked you the right question, but you understood it, right?
Understood, yes.
Yeah.
So basically there are 2 aspects to it. One, there is a house where you live with your husband or in-laws, or have at any point of time lived with them, and let's assume it's not in your name. You have lived there. You have the right in law, the right to residence, to reside there, because that is your matrimonial home, and you cannot be evicted from that house. You cannot claim ownership of that house if you're not the owner, but you have the right of residence as per the Domestic Violence Act. Now let's add to this mix that you're a 50% owner or you're a 100% owner, but the money has been paid by your husband. In the eyes of law, it is still your asset. It is still something that you own. It is for the husband who will take those 3-4 years to prove in court that she's not paid a penny. But these benami transactions, which happen in the name of the wife or the unmarried daughter, is a very common phenomena in India. So, but to answer very briefly, in the eyes of law, it is your property and your asset.
And even if it is not your asset, you are still entitled to reside in that asset.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Good, good, good. That's something which is, I mean, I think it's a point to note for a lot of women, because I see in a lot of such cases, I see that the woman walks out of the house and she's like, oh, this property belongs to my husband, or now my mother-in-law, and my mother-in-law is telling me to, leave the property because she says it's mine and I want to put it on rent or something like that. And I've been living in this house for 15 years, 20 years. Now, what do I do?
And that's usually right. And that's usually the first thing we advise. Don't leave your house. No matter what a hell of a life you're living there, do not leave your house, because then you have nowhere to go. You have the right to reside there.
Thank you so much. I think this was super, super enlightening. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you, lovely audience, for being there. Lata, do you have any questions? You've raised your hand. Otherwise, we'll...
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I have a
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask whether if the girl is sufficiently enough, she is independent, can she, and they are going for mutual consent divorce, still they can ask for maintenance?
Yes.
Still a woman can ask?
Yes. Because as I said, in a mutual consent divorce, there's no right or wrong. You may be a multi-millionaire, but you may still say that, I need this much money for this and that. So it's a matter of negotiation. You can ask anything, the sky, the stars, the moon, in a mutual divorce. It's a matter of negotiation. It's a matter of deciding what works for both of you. And once you agreed upon that, then you put that in your consent terms. But nothing stops her from asking for it.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Rakesh ji, we are already past time. Devika, will it be okay for you to ask?
Yes,
Rakesh?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Rakesh. Yes, Rakesh.
Madam, is the legal without divorce अगर एक आदमी दोबारा शादी कर लेता है तो?
हाँ, पर बिना डिवोर्स के?
हाँ, बिना डिवोर्स के.
नहीं जी, but that is bigamy.
I saw many cases.
जी.
They have married.
जी. ऐसा होता है. It definitely does happen, but that second marriage is again not valid in the eyes of law. In order to be able to remarry, you need to either your previous spouse ought to have expired, or you ought to have got some divorce decree which shows that that marriage has been annulled or has been divorced and it is completely over, and only then can you remarry. Because there are many complications that come up in having this second marriage. The first wife can come up and create some issue. There can be some children born from this second marriage, which may not in that sense be legitimate in the eyes of law because they are born out of a marriage which is not recognized in law. And there are many, then there are complications in case the husband were to, die without a will, then that wife has the right to his property under the Hindu Succession Act or whatever law applies to them. So matters get very complicated in law, which is why it is important to close one marriage and move on to the other.
Then what is the punishment of that person who
Because
has another marriage?
there is bigamy is, I don't know the exact punishment. I'll have to look up the criminal.
But it should be punished.
IPC, yeah. It is a punishable offense, yes.
Yes, sir.
It's a criminal offense, right?
Thank you.
Yes, under the Indian Penal Code too.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And all of you have a lovely evening. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Devika. This was super, super awesome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to more such exciting sessions.
Thank you.